conference is being recorded.
Hello, this is Russ Tanner from Global Skywatch, and it is September 30th, 2013, and this is Global Skywatch Radio. We invite you to join us every Monday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time. You can learn all the details about where you can view the live video feed by going to globalskywatch.com/live. You can also watch our live. You can also watch the video from our live stream as well. And tonight we are going to have a live video feed that is going to have important information that you need to see during this presentation. I want to get right to it. Tonight we have a very special guest who many consider the father of geoengineering and Morgellon's research. At least many people very respectably give him that title. He was previously a research scientist and a federal employee for 15 years with 3 different agencies, including the United States Department of Defense, the Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Forestry Service. His technical background is extensive in the fields of geodetic science, advanced mathematics, computer science, and the physical sciences. He is the founder of the Carnicom Institute, which you can find at carnicominstitute.org. And I'm very happy to have with us tonight Clifford Carnicom. Welcome, Clifford. It's just a pleasure to have you on tonight.
Russ, thanks very much for the chance to be here again tonight. It's always a great invitation and show that you make available to people, and a nice, sort of relaxed, casual, but nevertheless open door policy in terms of information distribution. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's my pleasure. We've had you on a number of times before, several times before, and you've always presented information that just I think is quite mind-blowing. I don't know anyone who's doing the same type of research that you're doing, and so you have very unique information and very information that we all consider very, very important. And I think this information that you're presenting is going to be more and more important as we start getting into the legal issues of exposing geoengineering, the dangers of it, the associated diseases. It's going to be, and it is foundational for what we're doing. So I would just love to hand the mic over to you. I'm going to go ahead and put your desktop on our stream now if you're ready. Is your connection ready to go so that I can start streaming it, Clifford?
I'm fine on my side, Russ.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and put your desktop on now so everybody can see your desktop on the live stream. And by the way, once again, if you want to watch this live, for those who are listening in, you can watch our live stream or find the link to our live stream by going to globalskywatch.com/live. And also, let me give you the call-in number so you can write it down and call in after Clifford is done with his presentation. We will take a few calls. Our number is 559-726-1300, and the access code is 156230. And once you call in to that console, you'll be able to press *6 when I tell you. It's not available right now, and you'll be able to join us and ask your questions. You'll be put into the question and answer queue. If you need international phone numbers or you need that phone number again, just go to globalskywatch.com/live and you can call in from about 15 different countries. We have local phone numbers available there. So, Clifford, the floor is yours. We are streaming your desktop, so it's all yours. Go right ahead.
Russ, thanks a whole lot. Oh, I appreciate it very much, and especially getting the video stream up there. I think it will be helpful, especially right at the beginning here on some photographs that we're going to look at. It'd be very helpful if folks are able to see those photographs as I speak about them. I think tonight I'll talk about 2 topics that have occupied me now for some time. We're going to start simple in terms of presentation of information, not simple in terms of what it all means and what it implicates for us. And the second one will be more more complex project that I've been working on. It's actually taken close to a year of time, at least by the time this is done. I will mention also that there is a significant relocation and move that's taking place with the Institute. Has taken place now, and I have moved from Santa Fe, New Mexico to northern Idaho, a small town called Wallace, Idaho, about 40 miles east of Coeur d'Alene. And the Institute will be set up here, still in a little bit of a state of transition, but the workings are in place for things to get operational again. So right now, tonight we'll be talking about a body of research that's very deeply ingrained in my head, but that work needs to continue as soon as possible in a physical sense, again, because it has to be finished, and it's very involved work. And the two topics that I'd like to discuss, the first will be a set of photographs that I'd like to show to people. And these photographs have basically taken 15 years to arrive, even though in a sensible world, we should have seen these photographs about 14 years and 50 weeks ago. But we have a 15-year wait for them. But we do have them, and so they are significant. And we'll talk about those for about 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes. And then for the second part, I'll try to talk about an hour tonight. So it'll be somewhat condensed, but at least want to make the information available for people to look at. The second will be a rather in-depth research project on the Morgellon issue, involving a paper that's roughly 100 pages long, probably without any doubt the longest one that I've worked on, that will encapsulate, I think, what is a significant body of information about the Morgellon's research that I've been involved in over the last 6 or 7 years, something like that. And it's pretty amazing, but even this 100-page paper is actually still a condensation of what is actually going on and what needs to be discussed, and the doors that it should open. But nevertheless, hopefully the body of work will accomplish that in future years. So this first topic that I'd like to talk about is the access to and receipt of some photographs under an electron microscope that I have been waiting over a decade for, a dozen years. And there will be a tie between these subjects. I'm discussing a project now that's in my head, of which I see 3 months from now, 2 to 3 months from now, is when I'm going to be actually able to start to work on it. But since it's simpler to describe, and it actually is a loop where the pictures that I'm showing you will be directly relevant to the project, research project regarding Morgellons and health that I'm going to describe later. So the photographs are of an environmental filament. The research project is on health issues. These two issues are intimately related to one another, as time will reveal. It has been revealed to some extent, although the level of, call it, correlation and matching is so extensive now that at some point in our future it will not be able to be denied the direct and immediate connection between the environmental filaments that we're looking at and the presence of the same structural forms within the human body in a very broad sense. So these photographs trace back to 1999. Now, many have heard me over the years continue to harp about a certain set of filaments that were sent to the Environmental Protection Agency in 1999. This was the advent of these filaments when the issue first arose, and I received about 3 different samples of these filaments from different places across the country. There's a great deal written up about these filaments, so I will not, take our time. We don't have the time now. But suffice it to say that there is a large body of written work and evidence related to these, what I call environmental filaments, dating back from 1999, involving the United States Environmental Protection Agency over roughly a 2-year period where basically there was a complete failure by the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, to identify these filaments when that request was made. And the EPA's eventual position after a year and a half, that year and a half was characterized by basically complete absence of response and acknowledgement of the sample. After a year and a half, they basically said we have no obligation to do anything here. We didn't ask for these samples, so we have no obligation to the public to do anything. Russ, you were speaking of, the legal issues, and in my mind, ever since that statement was made, there was and remains a significant legal issue that at some point can be pursued should those resources ever step forward. In that, my position is the legal parties would have to decide for themselves, but my position is that the EPA has failed in their service and duty to the public to perform a reasonable service directly under their mission statement of safeguarding health and welfare, basically, issues on this in the country. Nevertheless, I'll at least put that forth that issue has never gone away over the years, and it's even more striking now with the presentation of these photographs. Those familiar with my work will also know that I have been actually not just reluctant, I have refused to use the word nanotechnology with my work that I'm able to do for a very important reason, and that is I'm fairly accurate and specific about my work, at least at a degree that's possible. And it's not reasonable to think that nanotechnology could certainly be involved in these type of samples, but my position is that I can't use that term unless I have the actual evidence to show that. The best type of measurement I could get with the equipment I had was really by a factor of, call it 1,000 over what nanotechnology is. And it's really not fair to bandy about those terms, I don't think, unless we actually have the evidence to show it. And that's been a long time coming. It's not as though I didn't surmise that it was involved, but the use of the term is something I've avoided. With the appearance of these photographs, and what they are electron microphotographs. For the first time, the Institute is now in receipt of electron microphotographs of the original environmental filament sample material that was sent to the EPA in 1999. And the photographs they're both striking and not surprising to me. In my mind, I could certainly picture much of this because I have been able to make inroads even with my modified microscopic equipment that I have developed over the years, but I just could not get this type of resolution. And one has to have a sense of size and scale to appreciate what's actually happening here. Now, there is a scale on these photographs, and let's hope my mouse is acting up on me here. I don't know if that's accidental or not. Hopefully it won't be. But we'll see. We'll see the other. About 3 days ago, my computer was essentially completely taken over on the mouse, so we'll see if hopefully that doesn't return. But there is a scale on these photographs, and they will start at 100 microns, and they'll go down to 20 microns. I can see that things are starting to flip around here. I hope that doesn't become an issue for us. But they start at 100 microns and go down to 20 microns. Now, a human hair is roughly 60 microns thickness, 60 to 100 microns in thickness. Asbestos fibers are about 2 microns in thickness. Okay? I spoke of it many times, but we know of the attention given to the asbestos issue over the years and the removal of those basically materials and filament structures from the environment due to their extended health hazard. You don't want to be breathing things that are non-digestible, that won't break down in your body, and they are composed of solid materials. general should be actually quite damaging internally. It should be something that would literally cut you up, is what I would think inside. The filaments that we're speaking of here, I have known since really very early on that they were submicron. I've known that. That in itself was phenomenal information, okay, because there is no really known natural source for a filament of that size and with the properties of these particular filaments that should be occurring in the environment. And this is why the EPA had an obligation to basically identify those and release that information to the public. I've known that they were submicron. The resolution of these photographs is striking. If you actually look at the scale of these photographs and you go down to the smallest one, which is at 20 microns, I'll have to measure it sometime, but I have a pretty good sense as to what we're dealing with here. But what's happened is the photographs show that these filaments are clearly in the nanometer range. This is indeed nanotechnology. There is no known natural source for these materials whatsoever. And now it is proper and fair and dutiful to me to openly use the term of nanotechnology in association with the release and distribution of these most unusual filament structures into the environment. And so it is nanotechnology. The best estimate on the size I have right now would be around 200 nanometers. This would be roughly 0.2 of a micron. And I knew that I had things down to roughly 0.8 of a micron before, but when you flip over, we should be about 500 nanometers. We're down there. We're down there very reasonably. It looks like at about 200 nanometers if you look at that finest filament in these photographs. And basically, from the beginning, it'll blow your mind in terms of what you think is happening. When you get into nanotechnology, that's just, it's beyond us, even in our general sense of perception. Because even from the very beginning, when I would take a single, what you would think would be a single filament, you would try and isolate a single filament from the sample material, put it under a microscope, and I could get it up to eventually roughly 5,000 to 6,000 power. Electron microscope will get up to 100,000 to 200,000 power. A huge difference, obviously, and that's why that technology does not seem to be readily accessible to the public. Interesting for those that are familiar with Rife or Raymond Rife. You know, that guy was working at 30,000 to 40,000 back in the 1930s, but we can see that that type of information has simply not been available to the public except on rather controlled conditions. So we are indeed fortunate to have these images. And we can say that they were basically the gift of people that are operating in this field of work. So this is what we have. And what I was saying was when you took a single filament, you put it under the scope, even when you thought it was a single filament, even with conventional light microscopy, there was no end to the number of filaments that you could count. It was essentially infinite. What you thought was one was thousands to scores of thousands of filaments when you actually started looking at it. And these photographs with an electron microscope only bear out that point even further, and indeed, this is exactly what the world of nanotechnology is about. So, that would be the first part of this discussion, that there is documentation now available to the public on a most significant physical sample type that has been reported in the environment well over a decade, that has never been adequately researched or investigated or disclosed to the public by any, quote, authoritative agency or body, and that we have been dependent entirely upon the public resources to do this. And because of that, we have had a wait of over 12 to 14 years to receive this information, and that we have 12 to 14 years of the impact from these same filament structures upon this planet. of which there'll be no end of discussion on. They are real, and for anybody that attempts to deny or to mischaracterize the uniqueness of this material and the necessity for a proper identification, it's a falsehood, and it's damaging to the public interest to do so. Below this, you will see some photographs. Oh, and by the way, electron microscope is as nice as they sound. When you say, oh, it's great to see something 100 or 200,000 power, that's great. But you know, there's always limitations to technology also, and a very significant limitation with the electron microscopes. And I actually did see a photograph, electron microscope, of this filament structure about 5 years ago, and I knew at that time that I saw that. And by the way, the problem was there was no further examination or discussion into the nature of those filaments, but it was interesting. I saw those. But when I saw those, I knew there was an immediate problem, and that is when you work with an electron microscope, you're only seeing the exterior of many things. First of all, you got to kill it. It's no good for live materials, and that's what Rife was about. He was seeing live things at 30 to 40,000. Very, very important world of discovery that he was into that we don't seem to have too much access to for fairly known reasons, it seems. But the way it works is that you have to kill your sample first if it was live, and then the samples are basically bouncing off. It's basically an electromagnetic thing, and so they're bouncing off. They're not able to penetrate many call it membranes or surfaces. And that's exactly what happens here. If you see these filaments, you'll see that, well, it's fascinating in terms of the resolution you have, and you learn a great deal about their size, but you still don't know anything about what's going on internal to those. And what's fascinating is that conventional light microscopy, if you had sufficient magnification, actually is superior towards examining the internals of these filaments. And that's actually what I've done over the years. Even though I had a scope operating only 5 to 8,000, the truth is I was able to see very important things. And that is the real story here. The real story here is what is happening internal to these filaments. And now if you want to take on the world of nanotechnology and ask what you're really looking into, not only are the filaments themselves of a most remarkable size and something that is basically unavailable to the public to ever get access to, but the real issue is what's happening inside of those filaments. And surprisingly, with light microscopy over the years, I have actually been able to learn more about that part, which ultimately is the real secret and more important than the external. But nevertheless, we do have now, for the first time, high-resolution photographs that show us clearly the external size and the basically almost infinite nature in terms of the number of these filaments, even within a very small sample. Below this, as usual, I'm never keeping up with my projected time schedule, but that's the way it goes with Clifford, folks. But beneath this, you'll see some additional photographs that are with light microscopy. And what's happened here is I've been able to improve the scope another notch. It's unfortunate that it takes 12 years of evolution to get to this point, but I keep pushing the scope as best I can, but it takes resources. And sorry, but for over a dozen years, I've been using a $40 webcam, folks. I've done some pretty interesting jury rigging over the years in terms of how I've done things with Barlow lenses and such. But the fact is the resolution of my camera was quite low, and I got the best I could out of it, but it was still highly limiting. This scope, more recent one, is a notch up. It still includes all the Barlow lens modifications I've made, but the camera is higher resolution, and it is made for a microscope. And by the way, the public deserves the thank you for the presence of these photographs because they have made that scope available, that camera available to it. And it is a level, one notch up in terms of basically resolution and quality. So these photographs below are of the same sample, but with the use of light microscopy. And we're dealing with about the same magnification as I've always been able to get, just with higher resolution. These will be running about 5 to 6,000 in power. And what's significant there is the issue that I was pointing out is that what you're really after is trying to see inside of things, because this is where basically the activity really is. And we won't go to it in great depth, other than if you look at these photographs, you'll see that your window of information you're getting is considerably different than what you received above. And you do now have internal structure. That is extremely significant. And I've discussed that internal structure at great length in my paper, so I won't repeat it. But basically, the idea is that even what you think is a filament is not really just a filament. Internal to those filaments are additional, basically filament structures, as well as clearly biological components. That has been identified over and over and over, that indeed these structures do contain biological either components or agents, depending on how you want to think about it, and that is the real significance of these. And I regard the filament structures as simply a carrier or encapsulating structure for delivery of the internal material, which is clearly of a biological nature. So that's the first topic that I wanted to cover. That was the simpler topic by far of the two. It's frustrating on my side, of course, of how long it takes to receive this information, even though I've known about it for many, many years, what the general nature of things is here. But I am glad that it's available to the public. And what I'm thinking, Russ, it's sort of up to you, but what we could do, before I get on to this other subject, which is a whole discussion in itself, we could, it's up to you, but we could break for a couple minutes, 5 minutes or so, and answer any questions specifically related to this, because it's less likely that I'll be able to come back to this once I switch over to the other paper. Would you like to do that, or would you like me just to continue and we'll come back again and hit them both the best we can? I'm fine either way, Russ.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll turn on the Q.
Q&A session started.
And if anyone has an immediate question, I'll take 2 questions here real quick. If anybody presses *6 on their phone who's called into the console, go ahead and do that now. We could take a couple if you want. So let's see if anybody enters the queue here real quick, and if not, we can just move along. So just press *6 on your phone if you do want to ask a question at this point. If not, we'll have questions at the end too as well. So, and during the discussion, if you want to enter the queue, you can again press *6 on your phone, and you can enter the queue, and we'll just wait. We'll take you the next time we take questions. I will also post the phone number right now into the chat room in case you want to call the call-in console so you can ask a question or listen that way. Looks like everybody's intent on listening to you for the time being, so if you want to just move forward, I'll keep the queue open for people to accumulate their questions to the point where we're ready to take them. Oh, sorry about that. Excuse me. Let me get you. Let me get you unmuted here for a second. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. All right, you're back on, so if you want to go ahead, we'll just let people accumulate their questions till the end.
Okay, thank you very much, Russ. And we're going to transition now to really just an introductory session on this paper, which it's a challenge for me, basically, to get this done in many, many ways, because it's so involved. And even my editor on this thing is a hassle because it's being done in a web environment, and I sort of need to get into a word processing environment because my software can't keep up with me. So it's roughly 100 pages, and it's hard for me to juggle things around even the way I want to. There's so much going on. Even what I'm doing, I know it's not complete. but hopefully it's going to be an important consolidation of information. We're going to transition now to a research paper that I started in January of this year. I have roughly 3 months of preparatory sort of work going on prior to the beginning of the paper. The work involved a piece of instrumentation, an instrument that we received, a rather ancient piece of equipment, but nevertheless I've been able to get it functional, and that is an infrared spectrophotometer, and I think we may have talked about that last time, so I won't go through basically the science of that in too much detail, other than it's an extremely important piece of equipment in the biochemical world. You could spend your whole life studying that one piece of equipment and what it does and how it works. I've done the best I can with my time to get a quick education on the general nature of that instrument and how to accomplish certain things with it. The fundamental principle of that type of instrument is that organic materials respond to electromagnetic energy. Now, they might respond to other types of energy too, but this particular instrument measures that response of organic materials to this electromagnetic energy, and this electromagnetic energy is in the infrared spectrum. An infrared or IR spectrometer is one of the most fundamental and important instruments that exists to examine sort of the biological nature, organic nature of living compounds, essentially. Other types of spectroscopy, such as visible light, which I worked on the year before, are also, they're very helpful, but they are much more limited. And one of the main limitations actually comes from color. It's really quite interesting, but let's say you have a sample of blood or something. Well, if you can see color, then visible light spectroscopy is very useful for that, at least fairly useful. It's still nothing like infrared. But because you can see it, you can use visible light equipment. And visible light equipment is much, much less expensive, much more accessible and approachable to get. The problem is you can only get fairly limited information from it. But a lot of very important work was done with that visible light spectrometry, particularly in relation to blood and iron analysis. So it's still very important. But in the real world, the problem is that most organic compounds that we look at are transparent. It's quite interesting. But in solution, most of them are clear. And you can't see anything. You can put them under the scope, you wouldn't see anything. You put them in a visible light spectrometer, you won't get any kind of reading. So infrared is the way to go about it, because they do respond. Organic compounds, organic molecules respond to infrared light. And so we have such a piece of equipment. Again, it's the public that deserves the credit for that. I will say that it's quite ancient. It's over 20 years old. It's completely out of date in terms of the technology that's available to us now in the computer world, databases and this type of thing. So I won't deny that there are certain struggles that have been in place to get that equipment operative in a basic sense, but it has been done. But if you want to know how things could be advanced, it would be to be getting that equipment much more modern. They are relatively expensive, about 20 grand for those. But we did pick up one for a very minor fraction of that cost that I've been able to get operational. Now, the paper that I'm talking about is on the screen, and I'll read the title, and then I'll describe the general nature of the paper. It's probably as far as I'm going to be able to go, and point you into, some videos that you can start to look at that try to give another form of communication about this, and then also what still remains to be done. Because I am in a state of transition in terms of moving, getting things set up, there's a gap here I see my last date was August 12th. So in another week or two, I'll have a 2-month gap on here. And that's just out of necessity. And hopefully through the end of this year, I can finish up. I'm roughly, I would say, roughly 3/4 of the way through this paper. So I do hope by the end of the year that I'll have it done. I do think it's actually, I believe, one of the most significant papers that certainly I have produced because it actually encapsulates many years of research into the topics that are going on here. And the title is sort of summarizing what my assessment over the years is in relation to the seriousness of the impact of this issue upon human health. And the title of this paper is called Morgellons, a Working Hypothesis, and then the subtitle is Neurothyroid, Liver, Oxygen, Protein, and Iron Disruption. That is one handful, folks, in terms of what that subtitle is saying and what it has taken for me to get to that point, at least of my sense of understanding the impact of this particular condition upon health. And another point to keep in mind here is that as we work our way through this paper, which will seem a little bit, daunting and overwhelming to some of us, but I'm going to try and communicate what the big picture is. And in the real world, I anticipate it will be several years before this type of information is actually disseminated in a way that the public can understand, because that's what they deserve and that's what they need. I just have to do my work from the science basis first. I have to get the information and the analysis out there in my language, which is not necessarily the most pleasant for everyone, but I have to get it out there and get it done in a way that I can substantiate and justify with the resources and references and background that I have. There is a continual need for basically translation and communication of this information into the more public and lay venue. I'm just not the best person for that because I still have 2 to 3 months ahead of me to finish the paper I'm working on. We do have a little bit more active involvement going on with some of our staff that understand the importance of this and can help start to bridge that problem a little bit. And so we have 1 or 2 individuals that have very importantly have stepped forward to try and start writing summaries of some of these papers, at least so you'll know what they're about. But there's about 300 plus papers over the years, and the work has never been done. So even the summary work is a whole basically enterprise in itself. But one of the points will be that the photographs that I just showed you of an environmental filament, over time, it will be understood and known. I don't know how much time that's going to take. So far, realistically, we're looking at years. I hope it's not decades. I suppose it depends what we as planetary citizens do. But it will be eventually known and understood that there is a direct relationship, not a casual one, a direct relationship in the physical, material, chemical, biological, electromagnetic, and health perspectives between those photographs that I showed us at the beginning of this session, those environmental filaments that were reduced or refused by the EPA.
Clifford, you're still there? We're not getting audio from you. Clifford, if you can hear me, we've lost your audio. Don't know what happened. You may want to... Well, let me see if I can do something here at the console. Sorry, it appears that we've lost the audio, Clifford's audio, so let me see what we can do here. All right. Well, bear with us for a second. If you can hear me, Clifford, you may need
We're
to...
experiencing technical difficulties. Please call again later.
All right, well, if you're listening to the live stream, our stream is still going, but our console just shut itself down. Oh, goodness. Okay, well. All right, well, bear with us. Our whole phone console just shut right down. Let me see if we can get everybody back. We may have just had all our collars knocked off. Let's see. Yeah. All right, well, bear with us for a second on the live stream, if you will. Let me adjust the volume for my speaking microphone. Unfortunately, it looks like we have lost Clifford here for a moment. We've lost everybody. Our whole console got shut down. In fact, wow, my whole phone system got shut down. Okay, well, I guess this is life in the real world here, huh? So, all right, well, bear with us. Let me see if I can get everything cleared up here for a second. Just hang on, and we're going to get everybody back. So, okay, hang in there. We're still trying to get a console working. The whole phone console shut down. Worst comes to... All right, those who are on the conference, anybody can hear me on there? Wow, we have a dead console, it looks like. I may have to call Clifford directly. Um, okay, he's writing. Okay, all right. Yep, try to call back in, Clifford. If not, I'll give you my phone number, and you can call me directly.
We're experiencing technical difficulties.
Wow, there goes...
Please call again later.
All right, we'll try the console one more time. If it doesn't work, then we'll just have to do this direct. Yeah, we never had technical difficulties for a long time, and all of a sudden now we have them a lot. So actually the last, not a lot, but we've had them a couple times now recently. Let's try this again. All right, bear with us. We're still trying to get Clifford back on. Be right with you. Okay, for all of you who are listening to live stream, I'm going to send Clifford my regular phone number and see if he can just call me directly, and we'll have to finish the show that way. Let's see. All right, we'll see if we can get this worked out. Looks like their whole website, our conference calling system, the website has locked up. The console's locked up. It's knocked everybody off twice. So this is part of the joys of doing live radio, I guess. But let me see if I can get Clifford to call me directly on my phone line, and we'll pick it up from there. All right. Send a message to Clifford. Let's see if we can get him back in. Wow, they shut the whole console right down. Looks like I don't know if they're having a power outage or some kind of serious problem, but our console provider, the call-in console, is completely shut down, knocked everybody off twice, and their website appears to be unreachable. Hello, this is Ross. Hey, how you doing? It looks like the call-in console has completely died. We're still streaming live though, so why don't we just pick it up and we'll do it right from my my speakerphone. Yep. Why don't I? Yeah, it'll work out fine this way. It's just yeah, let's do it. Let me just put you on speaker.
Okay.
Okay, we're on speaker, back with Clifford. Apologize for that, folks. The call-in console has gone completely dead. Their website is completely down. They knocked all the callers off twice. Hopefully it'll come up. I'm going to keep trying to bring it back up. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and let Clifford continue his lecture. And so here we go. All right, Clifford, you're on. Your screen is being shared. So we're on the stream where the majority of people are anyway. So if you want to pick it up and keep rolling with it, we're live.
Great. Thank you very much, Russ. A little bit of an interruption there. I hope the train of thought hasn't been disturbed too much, but I'll try to restore it here best I can. And so what was happening there was I was saying that there is a direct connection between the photographs that I showed you at the beginning of this session and the paper that I'm starting to describe now. And the important line to cross there, to understand that the line has been crossed, would be that one side is environmental sourced. Those filaments are an environmental-based sample that have been reported on and observed and collected repeatedly over a decade plus, literally from around the world. That's the first. And the second is work and research happening entirely at a biological level within the human body. And what I'm saying is the connection is direct. And that will become more evident even than it is now. If you read the papers, it's actually already, the substance is already there. That precedent has been set. But with the use of infrared equipment, that conclusion will be further solidified. In terms of timing and plans in my life to get this work done, what I'm speaking of now is easily probably 6 months on the horizon before that information will become available. The reason for that is I need to finish this paper first, which is going to take at least 2 to 3 more months would be my estimate. And then after that, there's a body of work that will need to be done, of which only the preliminary stages have been done, but enough to indicate the importance of the issue. Work will have to be done. That work will probably take 2 to 3 months, depending on my time available. And then there will have to be a write-up on that. That will probably take a couple months. So not at all unrealistic that what I just spoke to you will not be available in any kind of written sense for the next, six months or who knows, plus. But nevertheless, you have that statement from me, and time will bear out whether those conclusions are true or not. This paper that I'm introducing to you is far too much to be talking about tonight in detail, and it's not fun reading for all of us. And people often want the punchline, and I'm just not a punchline person because I don't get there very easily without doing the work. But what I'm going to do is describe to you the general structure of this paper so that you understand that if you wanted to try and cut corners, and I understand that, and skip certain sections, and you want to try to get to the punchline, I'll try to guide you through that process a little bit, but by the same token, you were never allowed to get to the punchline unless the work that preceded it had been done. And at some point, it's in our mutual interest and those of the health community as well as those affected to actually dig into the details of that information to either corroborate, substantiate, or refute it, depending on what others find with their means. So I'll describe, let's see what we'll do here. I'd love to read, and I can't remember if this was in place when we spoke or not. This first paragraph may or may not have been available when we last spoke. I may choose to read some of it because it would be the conclusion, I suppose. If you want the punchline, I'll give it to you right at the beginning, at the top, and then you'll have to figure out what that all means by reading the paper. I might do that, but what I'll do is at least summarize what the structure of this paper is, and it transitions through 3 different sections or phases. And those are listed. I think I'll do that first, and then I'll go back and decide if I want to read that paragraph for you. The paper is in 3 parts. The first 2 parts of the paper are now done. The third one is about halfway to 2/3 of the way through. So that's where I'm at in terms of the paper. Each segment of the paper is taking roughly a few months of time to work on. The 3 main papers sections of the paper are as follows. The first is to start with a biological sample. Specifically, this biological sample is acquired by the use of red wine in the mouth. That process has been described on many sections over time throughout the paper. It's understood now, at least from my standpoint, why this particular reaction occurs, at least to a much greater degree. And it took years to get to that point because I knew as soon as that was happening that this particular chemical reaction is important. And it remains important. Anytime something reacts, you want to know why. I do have some understanding of why that is most likely occurring. But that's a sample, okay? It's acquired from an oral sample with the use of red wine from an individual. This type of sample has been collected repeatedly by many, many individuals and documented as such over a period of time. I wonder, yeah, I can show you. Hopefully I can find this photograph. Give me a second. Hopefully I can find this. There we go. There we go. These photographs are not necessarily pleasant, folks, to look at, but sorry, fairly small photograph, but at least the one on the right. That photograph on the right will be an example of the type of material that I'm talking about. That's in a sink. It's disgusting to look at, but it's quite real. And this material is of a filament nature, and again, I'm not going to go into all that, but it's real, it happens, and all evidence points to the fact that most people appear to be able to produce this material. And hence my statements over the years that my work shows that the general population is subject to the issues we're speaking of, not an isolated group of people. To sort of at least make you aware of the contrarian views, I'm certainly aware of them. And there are individuals that will tell you everything is fine, everything is normal, there is no issue here whatsoever. Those same type of minds were discussed in the documentary that I made in 2005, and the same holds here. You will be told that everything is normal, that there's nothing unique about this, that this material will occur through an interaction of saliva and wine. You can do your own homework, as I have done mine, but that statement is false. This is not the main determining factor. There'll be several, but the main determining factor for that conclusion will be that this is not a precipitate. Precipitate is a solid, basically, formation in a chemical reaction. And such precipitate does form. I've looked at that precipitate, and such a reaction does occur between wine and saliva. This is not that reaction. This is a filament structure, a filamentous structure. And that will be revealed to you should you choose to study it in the various ways that I have over the years. You can see also where this is leading, at least in part, is that the nature of that filament material will be essentially identical to the nature of that environmental filaments that I showed you at the beginning. But that's 6 to 8 months to come out at the level that it needs to. And also just the sheer volume of material that can be produced should be a little bit of a clue to people that we're not dealing with any kind of normal reaction here. This is a very unique and specific reaction that has to do with what are called anthocyanins, pigments in the wine. This particular organic structure. And then again, it's not entirely a mystery right now why that is occurring. The detail is not known, but the general nature of the reaction is not a mystery as it was for many, many years. So going back to the three main parts of this paper, the first will be to start with this biological sample material and prepare it in a suitable fashion. And every time I include a line like that, there's usually a month or two of work behind it to understand how that sample has to be prepared so that it will work with that type of instrumentation. You just don't slap it on a microscope or something and go to it. There's a whole set of protocols that are necessary to learn about when you're dealing with infrared. And I've had my own trials and tribulations going through that process, but I believe I have a pretty fair understanding of at least many of the significant factors involved. But nevertheless, if you can prepare this sample properly to where you can get infrared energy running through it, and you have a device that will detect that and record that properly, unique information will become available to you. It's probably the simplest analogy to make would be that of a fingerprint. We're familiar with the uniqueness of fingerprints. Infrared essentially will give you a fingerprint of organic reactions to that infrared energy. So that's the value of it. And every organic substance has this unique reaction. And so nothing will be exactly the same as anything else. Now, what this type of instrumentation is able to do, and what I could say it's not able to do as well, there are definitely limitations, and they're fairly severe limitations as to what you can do with this. And and that is the level of information that you're getting is fairly coarse from a biochemical standpoint. We are of a push-button society now where we think that you just put something into a box in a machine and you push a button and you know everything in the world that you want to know about this. And those that study infrared spectrophotometry in a little bit more detail will learn that that is not reality, and that there is a whole host of factors involved and limited degree of information that you will be able to get from that science. But nevertheless, it is at the absolute core of that science and a major breakthrough in terms of history of mankind to develop such instrumentation. It allowed us to see things at the molecular level, or at least interpret things at a molecular level that we had never been able to see before. And without a extended discussion on organic chemistry, which I've been schooling myself in as well over the years, the focus is on what are called functional groups. And functional groups are like the core building blocks that make up organic chemistry. Okay, they are groups of atoms and molecules that have a characteristic function. Is where it comes from. In other words, it's been learned that you can have something like a really huge, long organic structure, but in the end, it's these functional groups that make things happen because they are what react. And the functional groups are relatively simple in relation to that whole organic structure. And what they've learned in organic chemistry is that you don't need to know the entire structure, but you need to know what these functional groups are, okay, because that's where the action is. So this is what infrared spectrometry gives you, is actual identification of these functional groups that are involved. And there's roughly, there's different tables out there. You could find a table that would have a dozen. You could find a table that have 24 of them. But in a relative sense, it's a fairly finite, manageable number of these organic groups that are out there. And they pretty much make everything up. Everything is made up of these. So if you can get any insight into which functional groups are involved in an organic structure, you're making headway, I guess is how I would say it. You're making headway, and depending how sort of smart, I guess, you are in that science, you might be able to make further headway, okay, about what does that really mean. And this is what I have pursued to some degree within this paper. So if you see the first part of the paper, it is about the actual identification of these functional groups. This is biochemical in nature. This is a tedious kind of work that most of us don't want to read. And yet it's the heart of the paper, because it's the first time that I have been able to get access to the information in the same way that for the first time I actually see the photographs that I showed you, and I can make the claim that indeed those materials are nanotechnology. I can assert to you what these functional groups are from this work. Again, everything's conditional upon my own skills and talents and background, right? But for my person as a researcher, I can assert that these are the functional groups that exist. And we'll see that listing hopefully down at the in mid-paper. I'll try to make mention of that. Now, another thing that I'd like to mention tonight to everyone is that in the vein of knowing that all this work needs to be translated, and I know now that one of our members, Dan, is on the air with us tonight, and the person that you're looking to that is paving the way for trying to get this material translated in a broader sense and more lay language to people is one of our staff members, and I want to thank him personally for that, and he's on the line with us tonight. Okay, so the first attempt is to identify these, and I'll scroll through the paper, and I'll get to the bottom of phase one. And there's a lot happening here in between. There's a whole lot happening here. in between. And this is not a modern instrument, so I have to do all kinds of work, what you would call manually. It's not even manually, folks. I'm working with the most remarkable database that comes from Japan. If I didn't have access to that database, by the way, it's the only one in the world that I can find. The United States doesn't seem to have one available to the public. It can pay money, good money for this type of thing. But Japan, and through their grace, has made a very important database available to us. And because of that, literally hours and hours and hours of work have been saved. But if you had computer-driven equipment, you would have all this instantly. What I wanted to say there was that in addition to the translation work that's going on, this particular paper is complex enough that the Institute has embarked on a video summary of the paper also. And so on the Institute YouTube channel, you will find a webinar version of this paper in correspondence with those three sections that I'm describing. The first one being identification. We'll get to the other two in a minute. So if you want an alternative sort of presentation to you, please feel free to find the video presentations, of which the first two are done now. Phase 1 or part 1 and part 2 of the paper has been written. Part 1 and part 2 of the video production has been done. It's simply another way of trying to get the information. I'm not saying it'll be any more fun for you to listen to, especially you have to put up with me. But hopefully it'll at least it'll be a venue for some people that will be more friendly to them, more helpful. I have to warn you that the first one is especially detailed, and you might think, what the heck am I reading this for? Because it's not particularly fun. But again, it is the core basis of all of the analysis that takes place. And what I did here is, and the screen share right now, is a summary of that type of work of functional groups. I'm saying after 20, 30 pages, I think this is the right place. I'm saying these are the functional groups. No, we're still going. Actually, that's not the end. We have to I'll try to get through all these and find the end. But basically, you're matching up how this thing is responding to electromagnetic energy against known databases, a database of known information that correlates it. There we go. That's starting to be the end of that. Let's see if I can, it's right in here somewhere. It's there. Start collating. Anyway, I'd love to find the list for you. That's part of it. Okay, I'm going to have to go to that section there to read them. I have them all listed here, but basically at the end of this, at the top of this spreadsheet, it's a ranking system. But these are the types of functional groups that are being identified within this material. And you'll see words like carboxylic acids and alkenes and amines and amines and aromatics and this type of thing. These things are not trivial. These are extremely important that they represent fundamental constituents of organic structures or compounds. In this case, something which is essentially living. This is a structure that an organism that can reproduce itself and can grow. So it would meet the definition of a living entity. These functional groups are extremely significant as primary compositional building blocks of this organic structure. And there will be inference and analysis and conclusions that will be made and can be made from the existence of these functional groups. I will provide at least an introduction to that subject in this paper of 100 pages, which is just an introduction. Okay, we won't discuss those in detail, but you can listen to the webinar part also if you're willing to put up with it to get you to this point where you have such functional groups, okay? Now, let's go to part 2. This is the most I can hope to accomplish tonight, is describe what the nature of this paper is for those that are willing to start studying it. My hope is that the health and medical communities will at least give some attention to this paper and begin the process of interpretation and either validating or refuting it such that it can be understood by the general public more so. That's my longer term hope here. Okay, the second would be, if you look at this, number 2, what it says is potential health impacts of the various functional groups identified. Okay, this is a process where you're saying, well, the first thing is I want to know what it's made of, right? So that's part 1. And so you have some information now about, looks like this is likely what it's made of. And words like amines and aromatics, these are really important things because like amines are the basic foundation of proteins. Proteins are like roughly 50% of your body. Proteins have all kinds of very, very important functions. And so if somebody says there is an amine there, that's an extremely important piece of information. Same thing for aromatics. Again, I could talk about these at length, but I won't, but there's huge implications with what are called an aromatic there. Just won't have time for it tonight, but let's go on to this number 2 and at least summarize it. So, assuming you know what these basic building blocks are, and you had this set of like maybe call it 2 dozen, that's the pool to start from. Like there's roughly a couple dozen of these things, but I find like say 6 of them, whatever. It looks like I'm dealing like these 6 are the most likely to be here out of the 24. Well, that's already an accomplishment because now you're not just spinning your wheels in the dark. You're starting to focus in on these particular functional groups, a subset of the whole. So anytime you can reduce the sphere of analysis from the whole world to something that you can get your hands on, then you're making some progress. At least I would contend so. And so the second part is saying, okay, if you have this particular group of functional groups, no pun intended there, but if you had this particular group, and then you started to ask the question, well, you know, what are the most likely kinds of reactions that these functional groups are going to be involved in? This would be one question you would start asking. Because remember what I said is what characterizes biochemistry is basically the reactions of functional groups. This is what lets you avoid trying to deal with the whole ball of wax and focus in on just the reactive aspects to it. So one question would be, you know, what kind of reactions would you have? What kind of things would happen with these functional groups? And then secondly is, might there be certain health impacts that are more likely to occur with these particular functional groups than maybe something else? And the answer is yes. Okay, the answer is yes. And that's been a big part of the pursuit here. Okay. Now, I'm going to drop down to that mid part. First part is where you have identification. The second part, to me, is where life gets sort of interesting in terms of interpretation. The first stage is information, right? It's information. The second stage is where you're starting to analyze. And what happens is, and I'll try to find an example. Oh, I know where we could go. Yeah, we could go here. There's the list. There's the list, I see. I don't know how long that takes to catch up on the screen. But there's the list. That's the one. See how I phrase it? I say, let us collect a probabilistic list from the current work. And then that's my list of functional groups. Okay? And so you start looking at these and you say, well, acids. What might be the impact of acids with respect to health? Aromatics. What would be the impact, expected impact of aromatics on health? Okay? And so this is what you do on all of this. Aromatic phenol, same thing. Every single one. You go through them and you start asking, what might it be its impact on health? Okay? Oh, and by the way, in addition to this information, we have some information previously through other methods that's also extremely important here to bring into the picture. And this would be the work that was related to iron, the presence of iron, significant, it appears, significant sort of amounts of, in a relative sense, of iron within the structure or organism, as well as specific amino acids were identified through totally different methods having nothing to do with spectrometry. And so you don't forget that work. You bring that into the picture. And so this is meant to ease life a little bit and start presenting some pictures. And these are pictures of the various functional groups and sort of like representative things that are often associated with these groups. Okay, aldehydes, halogens is an absolutely, man, that is one powerful door of discussion with halogens. Huge implications to be found with that. So anyway, to get back on to this issue of impact of these functional groups, this is like a big puzzle that's being sort of developed here. And as you see this puzzle develop, what will happen is there's like three parts and you're putting them together. And you'll see these columns. I have tables in columns frequently. And one of the columns that we're going to consider is all of the reported symptoms that are either associated or known or observed to be in connection with the existence of the Morgellons condition. And if the screen share is working for you now on the left side, you are seeing some of these. This is what you call sort of a summary list, a master list of as best as I and this organization can express them, known physical impacts upon the body. And that list is worthy, it's fascinating in itself. This is just observed what happens to the body. I mean, the impact is huge, folks. This is where that title came from. If you look at that title, if I were to go back to read it to you again, unfortunately, it's saying it's an assault upon really all major systems of the body, one way or another. And by the way, if we get cut off tonight or before this is all over, understand that this is not a position of despair that I ever present to you. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm actually extremely optimistic in terms of first of all, the availability of this information as well as the interpretation of it and the implications that it has. This is what this is all about, folks. It's not just to present problems. It's to attempt to work towards solutions. And that's what's driving this whole effort, basically. And I will tell you in a very simplistic summary form that I believe there is tremendous information available to us now in terms of the understanding of the impact that this particular condition has upon our health and what we can start doing about it. But I also must caution us as the more I have become engaged in this. Anyone that, I'm not a doctor, first of all, never have been, don't claim it, and so don't attach it to me in any kind of way. I'm an individual researcher here. There's never any medical device, and you'll find that caveat in every single thing that I write and see just about. So there's no medical advice being given here. But the fact is, I think a great deal of information is available to us. And for those people that sort of approach anyone and ask for like a cure, quote, or a pill or a drug or something to take to remedy this situation, I'm sorry, it's not my path of research at all. I'm not particularly interested in the pharmaceutical approach for all kinds of reasons. First of all, look at how many people in this, particularly in this country, have no health care whatsoever. They're on their own. And let's just say I relate to those people. We are not taking care of our people in this country at all, and they're suffering for it. And the drug industry is not something that many of us would have access to, let alone the whole discussion that goes along what the real impact of that is with respect to health. And the more I go along with this and the more you put up with me, you'd hear more and more philosophical bent about the direction that I think we need to be going. It has to do with a greater sense of responsibility and understanding of health and what that means. Both health and nutrition is where you will see I will go in our discussion the more we get involved. And the idea of, quote, a cure or something simple is not what this is about, at least from my research. You'd have to pursue it elsewhere. So the parts of the puzzle will be, on one side you have the reported and observed symptoms, right? There's roughly a dozen and a half of them, and they're significant and they're serious. They're major impacts upon the body. Then you start looking at these functional groups, and I try to pick one as an example, maybe. The iron one has been discussed. This is not a functional group. The iron is not a functional group. It's just a necessary and important part of the project. I could use it, as a great example that if you know something exists, then you can start to assess what its impact upon health will be. The iron is a great example to use for that. Realize that the same process can be used with all of the functional groups as well. So I think I will use it because there's a nice picture there, too, to keep us a little bit occupied in between as an example about what the value of knowing something exists or not is. A very simple one about the iron, which is absolutely huge, is that iron, first of all, if you find iron, well, that would be significant. Here's my thinking. Listen, if I find something that has a lot of iron in it, then I could start asking, where did that iron come from? And if what happens to be growing or developing comes from the human body, then my conclusion, maybe other people would have different conclusions, but my conclusion is the human body is a source of that iron. And so that's huge to me. You mean to tell me you have something that's utilizing the iron within the human body for its own existence? That's done at the expense of the host, basically. So that conclusion alone was huge, just the fact that it's there, because you have to ask, where did it come from? And by the way, do not jump to conclusions. Sorry, this is where I have to get rather dogmatic, but do not jump to conclusions because I say something that we automatically know everything we need to know, and somehow we just start taking iron and it fixes the situation. Furthest from the truth, and I will emphasize, we do nothing without adequate education and or consultation with those that we respect and trust in the health or medical fields. Do not take this information and construe it in any way as some kind of medical situation where you are now armed with something and you know how to fix it. You've got homework, folks, to do, just like I have. We all have homework to do. But we do know some things, certainly, about what the impact of this, what this would mean in terms of iron. Because the next stage of discussion with respect to iron is that not all iron is the same. There are different states of chemical natures. It's what they call oxidation. There are different states of elements and compounds in the chemical world. And iron is a great example of that because you have iron existing in two primary forms, at least, and what they'll call oxidation states. And ultimately what this means is about, and what it's about is how reactive that element is, especially with oxygen, because oxygen is what causes, one of the main things, not the only one, but one of the main things that causes this change. And the simplest analogy here would be rust. Okay, we're all familiar with rust. And what's happening there is that metal, that iron, is combining with oxygen, and the metal wears away. And iron that is not in that particular chemical state, what they call ferrous and versus ferric forms, +2 versus +3, is totally different in terms of how it reacts and what it means. And in the body, most of the iron needs to be in the +2 state, and what they call bioavailable iron is in the +2 state. And the +3 state is not really very accessible to our body. Well, here's the fascinating thing that has come up in this work. the next interesting question is, what form of iron is it? Is it +2 or is it +3? And the work shows that it seems to be in the +3 state. Now, why is this important? It's huge, okay? It's huge because for your blood to work, for your blood to combine with oxygen, and oxygen is a source of basically all energy in the body, ultimately, what they call the process of respiration. As I study, respiration is not breathing. Respiration is a process of basically imparting energy into the body, and oxygen is the primary sort of mechanism by which that process happens. If the iron is in a plus state or a more oxidized state, then it doesn't bind to oxygen. It doesn't bind to oxygen in the blood properly. The iron needs to be in the +2 state for it to bind with oxygen in your blood. So now we're saying that if this iron is disturbed in your blood, it has huge ramifications with respect to your whole body and your whole energy flow. The entire system is being affected in a detrimental fashion if the oxygen basically reactions are impaired. This is one out of about probably 3 dozen things that I could describe on this paper and am describing about potential impacts of a particular substance or functional group upon the body. And I use that as an example because it's one of the most profound and easiest to understand, and one that has been documented the most in many ways over the years, that iron is absolutely a crucial factor here. Now, if you project ahead the process that I'm describing, you learn about the existence of something. You start asking, what are the potential health impacts of such either a substance or functional group? What might happen? This is what the whole second part of the paper is about. So imagine that you have about, 8 to 10, at most a dozen of these, quote, building blocks identified. And this will be on the left side of the column. And then on the right side, you have a list through research, for me it's through research, a list of the expected, likely, or probable health impacts from the existence of that functional group and or expected reactions that it would have with other functional groups. And this is the example of the one on iron. Okay, one single thing listed on the left side, right, iron. What do you have listed on the right in terms of the impact of it? Also, the bacterial form is there too. By the way, bacteria are very tied in with iron, folks. They feed off of it. You have over a dozen entries of likely health impacts from this particular chemical component, okay, biochemical component, biochemistry. About a dozen impacts. And if you start looking at these are fairly serious things that we're speaking of, right? Now, here's where the overlap starts to occur. You basically have 3 columns that you get to work on and match up. One column is the existence of the biochemical entity or functional group. This is one column. Another column is the expected health impacts from it, completely sort of independently, right? What research, or whatever research will provide you. And the third column is the observed and reported health impacts upon the body. So I'm hoping you can imagine all 3 of these columns sort of developing. And it's like each column is its own flowchart, right? Each one has its own line of reasoning that's going with it. One's identification, one's interpretation and analysis, one is observation and documentation of impact, health impacts. So imagine those things forming side by side, because that's what part 2 of the paper is about. And there is a video segment. Each of those video segments is about 2 hours long, because I can't get through this very quickly. there's a video segment that also describes this very same process that I'm talking to you about. But the whole second part of the paper is that process of going through each functional group and going through that process, right? And imagine the table forming. So there's another great example, right? Another great example, when you start getting to aromatics, you start learning about aromatics, right? And so first you have it. You have this thing called an aromatic. Then you start learning what that means, okay, in terms of health. And this brings up topics like fluoride and the halogens in general. Fluoride, bromine, iodine, what are called the halogens, the most reactive elements on the planet, basically. And then you got to start thinking about, well, do we have any impacts of the halogens upon our body? And yes, we do. And there's a whole section of the paper that will talk about that. And do we have any reported health symptoms that might sort of correlate with those type of symptoms? And this is what you get to discover during the reading of the paper, but the short answer is yes. Yeah, you will start to see significant overlaps take place. So I'm going to go to the bottom of part 2 of the paper. Once in a while I give you a picture to look at, so hopefully your life won't be too drab. But there is some work I did to give you some pictures about what it means. And I'm going to go try and find the bottom of the second part of the paper. And you can, if you follow what I'm doing, you can almost predict what I'm going to present to you. There it is. There it is. With one important qualification and modification of what we've discussed about. And this is it. This is the end result of part 2 of this research project. And it's just like I said, on the left side, it's what you find. On the right side, it's health impacts, right? And the right side of the column is now combining. It's starting to combine things because there's 2 things that we're after here. We're looking for an association between reported and observed conditions and actual health impacts based upon research. So they're starting to be combined. And that's what happens. If you look at the headers to the table, you'll see that that's exactly what I'm doing, is I'm starting to combine it. It could be reported and observed, okay, and expected, right? You're starting to put them together, matched with the structural components. And the difference in the table now is you get to start combining information. If you'll see on the left side, instead of one at a time, it's all of them. It's a whole group of things, okay? So you get to combine information now. This is one thing you get to do. And the other thing you get to do is start to eliminate redundancy. Now, what if a functional group has a particular health impact, and then another functional group has the same health impact? The purposes served by this paper are not at that stage in the ultimately to be listing the same health impact twice. It's to find if there's any coalescing of this information in some type of consolidated sense that gives you an overall picture as to what might be happening. So redundancy is eliminated on the right-hand side, even though I might have had something that came from 3 or 4 functional groups all producing the same health impact. So this is a significant modification of the table that combines itself. And I would contend at this point that you have a rather significant body of information that is available to you. The truth is, one could stop at this point and put the entire medical profession and health profession to work. Because first of all, they would need to do the work to decide whether or not this work is valid or correct or not, if not, show why. And then once you have it, then they need to go to work because now they need to understand what this chart means. and how to start dissecting it out and what has what influence and what are you going to start to do about it. So from one sense, I could say that this is my offering, or an offering to the public in what I regard as a significant encapsulation and summary of years of research that shows the parallels between the specific biochemical structures which are identified to exist, at least with my work, and the expected health impacts from that. And when you have that information, you are no longer ignorant. You have a very significant body of information that you can start to work with from a health perspective. And I would contend that that responsibility for that process does exist at this point with the presentation of this information. Now, the last section that I'll get to is in process. It's in process, and this is the one that will probably take me another 2 to 3 months.
Clifford, could I do something real quick for a second?
You betcha, because I'm way over my time, I know.
Oh no, it's no problem at all. The call-in console was down until now. It just came back up, and I want to try to join us back with the console. So if you can hold on for just a second, let me see if I can conference us.
Sure.
All right, let me see if I can get that back on there. So
Can I take a break for 30 seconds anyway?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. All right, just bear with us for a second. I'm trying to conference our console back. I don't know. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do it this way. We may have to do it the other way. Yeah, the console, just so you all know, the console site did go completely down, and it just came back up. See a couple people on there, which is good, but it kicked everybody off, including me. But at least we've been able to continue the stream, so that's a good thing. So if I can't conference us, yeah, it looks like I'm having trouble. I'll see if I can get Clifford to call back in on the console, and then we'll be able to take questions once again.
So I'm back anytime then.
Okay, very good, very good. We do have the console back, which is nice. Hopefully it will stay back up. This is the way that we take questions. Let me see if there's a way that I can conference us with that console. So if you can give me just a sec. Sorry about that. I'll make this quick. If it doesn't work, that's fine.
I suspect people need a break anyway, so.
Oh, I think people are engrossed here, but I'll be right back. Hold on just a sec.
that, I'll try to pull it off, say, in the next 15 minutes to 20 minutes max. Is that okay on your timing?
It's no problem here. We don't have any time limit here, so you just take as much time as you need, and no need to worry about any time limits at all from us.
Okay, I'm guessing that's what I'll go to, and then we'll maybe take a couple questions.
And to those people on the stream, if I excuse me, one more second. If you guys want to call into the console is back up. It is 559-726-1300, and the access code is 156230, or you can just go to globalskywatch.com/live, LIVE, all small letters, and you can get the phone numbers there. And we'll take questions in a few minutes, but we're going to keep rolling forward now that the console's back up. So thank you, Clifford. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Russ, and your listeners as well for their patience. Okay, soon we're going to head towards the third part of this paper. But before I do that, I think I'd like to interject another piece of information. And this would be that I did my work, I'd have to say pretty much from scratch, independently. No assumptions or presumptions, to the best of my knowledge, about where I was going to be led to. And that's really what characterizes the research from the beginning. If you think about that, you have a biological sample, you have an instrument that does certain things, you do your work, you do your study, and you present your information. So that's starting to be what's happening here at the end of that second part of the paper. Now, when I was, done with the work, or I had surmised these primary building blocks that were being identified, along with that, I did become aware of a database that exists. This is the one I referred to that exists in Japan. As I mentioned, I did not find any such place in the United States, other than I'm sure there are if you're willing and able to pay for it. But to find a public source of information of infrared spectrum at a fairly complex level, incorporating literally thousands of organic compounds, there's only one place in the world that I have been able to find this information, at least available to the public, without charge, and that is through a Japanese database. SDBS is the name of it, or acronym for it. And to further demonstrate that I do not believe the work that is being offered is sort of frivolous or of no consequence here down the road, I came up with my conclusions based upon my examination of what you'd call tabulated conventional information that is known with respect to infrared spectrometry. In the modern world, if we had, the instrument that we'd love to have for 20 grand, one of several instruments that we need, but certainly one of the most important, I think, at the onset of modern IR spectrometer, there's databases built into these things, folks. It's a computer world, okay? You have no idea what we've done to produce the information that I haven't done. But in the modern world, you have a machine that ties into the computer that has a database built in, and you're getting continual feedback from what you're doing in pretty much an instantaneous real-time sense, as opposed to me looking up one by one, in various tables and charts and tabulated software, and creating my own spreadsheets and my own analysis. That's the world we'd like to get to if anybody feels they have sufficient devotion, I suppose, to the cause at hand. But in that pursuit, I was aware that this database existed. And when I was done with all of my work, I fed my information into that database system. Okay? Now, databases themselves are not black and white, and we'd have to talk about the nuances of the database, because you have to have an estimate of errors in your work and this type of thing. But, let's just say I did what I thought was most reasonable in light of all of the information and I put it into this database to see what it might say. And that graph that I'm showing you now is an expression of that work. And it would be foolish and folly to think that what we're speaking of at this point is some simple, like just some single organic compound. You're talking about basically a living organism of some kind. So we just don't have that level of detail at all, not even close to it. But nevertheless, I'm after the core, what you call core elements, like the heart of what we can learn about this thing with the means and tools that we have available. And that's what this spectrum is about. I'm trying to ask here, hey, what does Japan say? What does Japan say with having to have a database of 10,000 plus or whatever organic compounds in their database, the only place in the whole world that I can find access to, which might have been on my machine had I had 20 grand to get it, but I don't. But thank you, Japan, for making this information available to the public, because we wouldn't have any such frame of comparison if they had not done so. So I'm very grateful for that access to that information and what it reveals to us. But I did submit that data to that database. And the simplest way I can say this would be that I regard the findings as they sort of emerge from this database available to us. The results of that work, I find it to be essentially an extremely high level of correlation and agreement with my own independent analysis that led to the eventual use of the database, ultimately anyway. My work is of its own standing, and then, like I say, it will have to be refuted or verified or partially either way. But the level of what I would call agreement between the core sort of biochemical organic structure between these two lines of information, I would call amazingly similar. And all of the implications that I talked about with respect to health also implicit within that level of correspondence. A fascinating line of discussion. There's two that we haven't even begun to talk about tonight, but two fascinating lines of discussion. In addition to all the things that have been talked about over the years with iron and oxygen, all this kind of thing, and all and the whole acid thing that's in here. But two other topics of special interest will be that of the thyroid influences of the halogens upon thyroid activity, a major topic. And by the way, there are people, I have been clued into this by some people for years, that this is likely to be an issue. I simply had no data to work with, but I will tell you that there are people that have been on to that issue for years. I have to get there in my own way, in my own time, with the means that I have available. I will say that the topic of the thyroid, basically an underactive thyroid, and your simplest clue to that will be body temperature being lower, is incredibly important and shows itself being directly relevant and an issue with both my work as well as what's implied with the results from this database. And the other, a little bit touchier to get into ultimately with the public, but again, I believe valuable, will be this issue of neural disruption. It's a rather fascinating topic, but you know how I said certain functional groups have expected health impacts. There's one particular combination or group that really caught my interest over time, and it was fascinating, and it's in what they call the phenols. And what's fascinating in organic chemistry is if you just tweak something just a little bit, I mean, just change it just a little bit, and it completely modifies what happens, okay? I mean, it's so fascinating, and there's so many endless combinations of things that it's just an amazing maze to work through and figure out this business of organic chemistry. But one of the things I suggested early in the paper as I was going along, you'll see that I draw attention to a particular functional group that I'm finding. If you read it, you'll see what's happening. I say, this is a functional group that looks like it's involved here. It's called a phenol. It's a hydroxyl group attached to an aromatic ring. And then I start researching this particular structure. And in the process, you're looking for slight variations. This is what will cause things to happen, is slight variations of these organic functional groups. And I find one of these variations that fascinates me because it's just the slightest modification. It's basically adding another hydroxyl group to this ring. And suddenly, if you do this, and this is all projected, the paper is just projecting, it's just saying, if you did this, you now introduce something that is very likely to have some impact or connections with neural functioning. And that opens up a whole onslaught of really serious issues here, especially when you go back to the reported and observed conditions and impacts upon health. Again, reported and observed. And the neural, I say, dysfunction, cognitive impact is clearly stated within that set. And if you look at this work, the work was projecting ahead that such a sort of modification could very easily exist and may, at least in part, explain, let's say, the attention. I'm so diplomatic in my language, but explain the attention that is appropriately devoted to the neural dysfunction issue. And those are all loaded statements that I'm talking about with respect to the thyroid as well as neuro that can basically lead to years of investigation by the proper teams if we ever get that. But there is a strong suggestion here that something like this indeed may be at hand here. And it is further, let's just say it is further corroborated with that comparison from that spectral database that I made reference to. So major issues there have emerged from this work as far as I'm concerned. Okay, the last section, it's probably what everybody just wants, right? Everybody just wants to be well and healthy in our lives. We don't want to have to spend years of our life devoted towards problems in our lives. We'd much rather be healthy and well and be fruitful and enjoy our lives. And I know that, and I think we all share that. And I'm trying to get there the best I can. I'm not a doctor. I'll do the best I can, but I'm not a doctor. But I will attempt in the last section of the paper, and again, I'm about halfway through this section, the final stage of the paper, I will attempt to offer, and I qualify this over and over and over, the language is from a research point of view. I will attempt to offer from a research point of view what I call strategies, various strategies of consideration towards what you would call improving the state of health for those that might be negatively impacted by the entire preceding sort of body of information related to functional groups and health impacts that I'm offering. Okay? I will attempt to provide strategies. Nothing is complete, I've got to get through this paper. I could probably spend my whole life researching this, but I can't do it forever. So I'm going to do what I can, and you will find me basically going through these issues that evolve. Now, see, there's a statement, and that would be, I'd love to find that. Because it summarizes, after all the research, why sort of that subtitle came up on the paper, where I listed those 5 things. Well, here it is. how and why that title developed. I'm going to read this one because it's a summary of what I am finding in the broad sense. And again, I have to say, do not be discouraged in life. I feel exactly the opposite. I feel that if we assume responsibility and apply our knowledge and wisdom that we have gained through basically pursuit of what is true and what faces us, that we will all be the better for it. So there is no despair in my attitude whatsoever, and to exactly the opposite of what I am attempting to impart here, is that we have no excuse to be ignorant about what is happening. We have a responsibility to confront what is before us and to assume our rightful state of health in this world. Here's the statement that is a summary statement about what was found. It said, on a macro scale, we can see that some of the more obvious issues to be addressed concern iron disruption, amino acid presence and protein rebuilding, acidity, oxidative stress, availability of oxygen, thyroid and metabolism issues, halogen toxicity and substitution concerns, joint and skeletal integrity and elasticity, blood and cellular integrity, and potential neural disruption. Unfortunately, the list is not exhaustive, but it is representative of some of the health concerns that have been brought to the forefront and reported on. That's my summary statement about what I would call the situation. Okay. Now, I'm one person, and you need to get your medical professionals, health community involved to do their work, because I'll never finish the task. I can only sort of point the door. It seems to be my path in life. A lot of times it simply points the direction. I learned one time that the name Cliff originates from like somebody like Cliff Ford, right, looking over a Ford. And one has to wonder if it's an accident in my life or not. But I do present, I take those, 8 things or so that I just described to you, and I start to ask the question. This is my own process of education as well in my journey in life. But I start to ask, well, what if you had information that said your body might be too acidic, that it might be imbalanced with respect to acidity. It might be imbalanced with respect to the thyroid. Okay. If I had information about that, what is my task? What is my job? And my job is to learn and to understand. Okay. Where did it likely come from? Okay. I may not have to dwell on that, but it might be helpful if I understood where it came from. But what do I do about it? If you know something about the state of your health, I think we have a responsibility to try and change that situation to the best of our ability. And the only way we can start doing that is by knowing what the primary influences are, and that's that list that I read. Now, it seems overwhelming, to some, but my education in this process as I've gone along is really, it's been sort of my own transformation. And this is one of disease, the subject of disease. I've said this to a few people. I'm trying to get this message out because it's where I'm at in my own head about where we need to go. And it's a much broader view of the situation. There are certain individuals that I would say act in a sort of what I would call a victim mentality, that want an instant cure. I'm not the best person to listen to because this is not the direction I have gone at all in this work, because I don't have a quick answer for you. And the idea of a pill or a quick fix, it's just not there with what I see. When I look about this impact upon the body, I'm saying, we're dealing with the system here, folks. body system itself is being impacted. So we got to look at it from a system point of view. Now, in that process, here's part of what happened to me. I went back to the basics and I said, well, what the heck is disease in a broader sense? And so at a used bookstore in Flagstaff, Arizona, about 3 years ago, I saw this 5-inch thick book on pathology, study of disease. I bought the thing, and this book is like, whatever, 1,000 pages long. And I'm going to be, very honest on this, and that is, I've only made it through about the first 35 pages of that book. And the reason that I have only made it through about 35 pages of the book is because a very important sort of message was given to me in that introductory chapter in the book that I don't have, let's say, right now, the need to spend the rest of my life studying pathology. It might be another worthwhile enterprise. But I certainly needed to understand that introductory chapter because it was fascinating to me. Because what pathology, you find yourself a good book, this one is Robbins, you find yourself a good book on pathology and you're willing to, go through those first chapter. What I find is that they start by saying, what are the causes of disease? And before I started the book, I assumed that things were so nebulous, so complicated, so twisted, that who could ever hope to understand what the cause of disease was? That's how I was going into that book. When I read that chapter, the elementary chapter on pathology, I was, pleasantly surprised that mankind is not in the dark, even from a conventional standpoint. We are not in the dark in terms of what the fundamental mechanisms of disease are. And there's 4 of them. I'm not going to go through them, but there's 4 primary sort of mechanisms of disease. They will involve things like breakdown or disturbance of cell wall membrane, oxygen, and you've had a clue already about oxygen being a source of energy, but interference in the flow of oxygen, oxidation and free radicals, the wearing down of things like the rust that I was talking about, like the metal wearing away, excessive oxidation, and interference with the reproductive system, the genetic encoding to reproduce itself. These are at the heart of all disease. Now, for a lot of people, it may have been too general for them to do something with. For me, it's exactly what sort of connected with me. Because the person in the book, and this book was written in 1978, this edition, I'm saying this, there's information. Every one of us, as far as I'm concerned, should be exposed to the science of disease and pathology in our high school days. So we're not ignorant our whole lives. But we're not. And when I was reading this, what I was noticing was that the author here, he wasn't saying that such and such a disease causes this. He was saying this is the impact of all diseases as we know them. This is the net impact of every and all disease that we know of. It's that these fundamental parts of the body are disturbed and broken down or interfered with. And he didn't qualify it. And the reason this is significant was because as I have pursued my research over the years, what I am seeing is that the net impact of this particular, quote, condition, whatever you want to call it, Morgellon. So I'm not saying it doesn't have its unique aspects. I just spent, a half hour at the beginning talking about nanotechnology and the surprises inside filaments and delivery. I spent time talking about that. Nobody is dismissing the uniqueness of a particular situation that's at hand here. But on a more fundamental level, the impact and effect upon the body and the system of health, as I see it, is ultimately exactly the same as that which is expressed in a standard reference book on pathology and disease, and those mechanisms are identified. And if you understand those mechanisms and what they mean, what does it mean when you don't have proper oxygen flow? Okay. What does it mean if the body is too acid? And you start to understand what that means, then the pathways for improvement are actually common to all health and disease. They are not unique to it. And again, I'm not dismissing the uniqueness here, but I'm saying my mindset at this time and over the past several years is that there are avenues. There are known specific avenues of improving the state of health that correlate with this particular condition, I think, in essentially identical fashions to other known disease, because the fundamental mechanisms are identical. And the last part of this paper will attempt to at least present some of these strategies. Now, what I'm seeing as part of the difficulty here is that this becomes a way of life. It becomes a change in your attitude about responsibility for your own state of health and your own awareness and education and your own action. And I'm not claiming any kind of sainthood here at all, folks. Listen, I have my vices. I don't happen to smoke. I did for a couple of years. Well, actually more than that. I smoked a pipe for a dozen years. And we all have our vices, but I'm definitely not a smoker now for the last 20 years. There's things that we can do. We make decisions. And with the information that I believe is available here, there's even more information and knowledge specifically about things that can be done that make sense. And you start, this is not original in this sense. At this point, I'm a researcher. Okay, some of the work is original, right? Identification. At this point, if you look at it, I'm saying, evidence that the body is too acid. What do? There are things that you do. And they're ways of life. They're not a quick fix. And start to learn about these ways of life, okay? Help me out with a project here sometime. I'd love to get the word out. Grab 100 people off the street. They can be anywhere. I'd love them to be across the world. You go give me a sample of 100 people right now and take their body temperature and record it regularly. Like, give it to me 10 days in a row, morning and afternoon, for 100 people. Take them all over the world. You give me that information. I suspect I can predict something. And the prediction is that body temperature will be low. And there are reasons for this, okay? Listen, when you have an engine running in your car, it has to run at a certain temperature, or it doesn't work. Fascinating statement in terms of the world of biochemistry. This one was profound. I buy these $12 CDs at a high school that are like on eBay, and nobody in the world cares about them. And I listen to this thing, and you hear the statement, it just blows my mind. Because here's what he says in the biochemistry study. He says, every biochemical reaction that takes place at a specific temperature and a specific pH, meaning acid condition. Man, when I heard that, light bulbs going off all over the place. He wasn't qualifying it again. He wasn't saying some or a few. He was saying essentially all biochemical reactions must occur within certain specific conditions of both temperature and acidity. And the inference was basically, if it's not there at that temperature and not at that pH level, it won't happen. Or it won't happen the way it needs to happen. Whether it involves, enzymes or whatever, the reaction won't occur. So if we had evidence, and I ask you to go ahead and start collecting it amongst yourself as well as all the other people around the world, if you had evidence to indicate that the generalized body temperature of the population may be low, like call it 1.5, 2 degrees, go ask yourself what happened to the 98.6 thing. How come we're not all talking 98.6 anymore, folks? But if your temperature is dropped down 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, start asking, what does that mean? I just got done saying reactions don't occur unless they're at the temperature and pH, right? I said both. Well, I've given you just one. We didn't even talk about acidity, but one of them's off. What do you expect to happen if your engine doesn't warm up properly? The body doesn't work. Now, I won't have all the answers, but I will say that the last section of the paper is pursued, and it's from a pure research point of view. You can all do it. Every one of us can do it. It's what the medical and health professions do. If we know we have a set of conditions that exist, then what would we do? And you can pursue that from a pill if you want to. It's not how I want to pursue it, because I can't even begin to imagine how you deal with the system complexity in the way that has been outlined here by thinking of some, simple or intermediate fixing line. And the other clue I'll give, I guess, on the way out in terms of the way my mind is sort of adapted over the years now. And again, I'm not claiming any sainthood here whatsoever, folks. But at least I'm the one responsible if I have the knowledge. And this is the issue of nutrition. Because more and more, as I have gone along here, I see that the way out of ill health is generally, in the macro sense, needs to be and is focused upon nutrition. Because nutrition is the source of nutrients, and nutrients are the source of growth, and growth is a source of healing. And as I've gone along, and I'm trying to begin to express it in the paper, but I'll tell you, I have a heck of a lot of respect for the nutritionists of the world. And I think they're understated, because we place so much of our focus upon, quote, the doctor and fixing something, which very seldom could ever even approach anything in a systematic way, meaning the whole system. I just gave you 8 to 10 ways that the body is likely being impacted. There is nothing that I know of that a, quote, doctor can do in a singular fashion to produce a result that takes care of that multitude of problems. But who can? And the person that can most effectively, I believe, in addition to and concomitant to the health professional, is that of the nutritionist. Those that understand how our bodies are nourished and impacted by what we bring into it. Because this is the ultimate source of healing, is what I'm saying. And I don't know whether my message will be accepted or not easily, because it's not an easy message. Because it does become a way of life, it becomes a constant pursuit, and it becomes an acceptance of responsibility for the changes that we need to make. And it also removes some of the uniqueness and sensationalism that can be ascribed to a particular condition with a particular person. And I'm not dismissive of that. Listen, I understand the role. A drug can be a powerful, magical thing sometimes in the history of mankind, right? But in the broad sense of where I think we need to be going. Listen, it's a simple example. If you have oxidative stress, your body is being oxidized at a rate that is wearing you away quicker than you're able to build yourself up. What do? Well, go research it. Go research on what you do about excessive oxidation in the body. There's something called antioxidants. There's a lot of people that think antioxidants are extremely important with respect to improving health in our lives. And and reducing the effects of aging. That's not an accident. There are some that will disagree with these, and there are some people that will advocate, highly concentrated forms of oxygen into the body. I'm not going to get into those debates other than research the literature, evaluate the wealth of information that's available to, and balance out your scale about what direction you want to go. But I would say, I think you will find a huge body of information. It'll be back in that book of 1978. They knew it. This is not new. They understood that if you had excessive oxidation in the body, that you needed to combat that. And antioxidants are a whole field of nutrition and health that has emerged over the last 2 decades, and it's in the literature all over the place. And so what are antioxidants? Well, again, I don't know any of this when I start, but you learn. Well, guess what vitamins are? Vitamins are antioxidants. It's one example, okay? Glutathione is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful antioxidant in the world. By the way, when I say something, you just don't go take something. You just go take iron, and you just don't take glutathione. You need to study it, okay? You need to study it. Iron consumption can have risk. You can take all the glutathione you want in the world, it probably won't have any effect. You need to learn about what are called the precursors of glutathione, such as NAC and acetylcysteine. You need to do your homework a little bit, or talk to people you trust, and make our lives better. And it's a lifelong journey, and it should be a lifelong journey for your children too. So anyway, I'm going to get off the soapbox there, and understand that's what the third part of the paper is about. And I know that I've talked about some of them. I've talked about acidity, I've talked about oxidation, and I'm going to talk soon. 2 that are unspoken right now will be the thyroid issue and the neural issue. And I'll have to review if I'm missing some others, but I know that those 2 are on the forefront. See, look at this. Look at it. Sorry, I can't help it. Like I'm saying, the information is there. We need people to help us communicate it and to collect it and communicate it. My papers will never do it by themselves. I need your help, okay? But this is a direct quote out of Robbins, a pathology book. And he asked the question. He said this, not me. He said, this is a quote. He said, once free radicals are formed, how does the body get rid of them? And he answers succinctly with one very important addition, and it's around to the research. There are several systems that contribute to termination of inactivation of free radical reactions. These include antioxidants, enzymes, and glutathione. Look at that. He's telling you. He's telling you in 1978. Okay? So let's dig in with the pursuit of health from my standpoint, with an emphasis upon nutrition and the role that it's going to play in our lives, and turn away from any of the more sensationalistic pursuits that are not necessarily producing tangible information of improvement. I guess that would be one way that I would summarize where I think we need to go. So with that, Russ, I think I'm going to end at least the general dialogue, and I always appreciate your show and your audience, particularly in the atmosphere of your show, of free and candid discussions that we get to have between us. I hope that it's been beneficial to the audience. It's only a starting point, folks, but it's an important one, I hope. And that this particular paper will attempt to encapsulate many years of research and draws upon some of the previous papers. And I do need your help. I would request that the translation, that efforts be made to make sure that it's accurate. Sometimes people will pass on information, like everybody trying to act like their own little doctor and such, and that's just not. We don't have the really freedom to do that. So I hope that you'll help translate the information, present it, and communicate it to the medical and health professionals, and go ahead and get their evaluation. I'm not saying that they have to agree. I'm just saying this is what I offer. And hopefully we can get this information. If nothing else, the path of research and the subjects of research may have been sort of narrowed down to the point where we can make more effective progress in a more rapid fashion than what has happened over the past decade or so. So anyway, I'm going to end there, Russ, and thanks very much. And I'll shut up for a bit, and I'll try to take a couple questions. I'm going way longer, of course, than I really is sensible for me. But a couple of questions maybe, and then we'll just go on from there.
You got it, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm going to be reading this paper. Besides the things that you talked about, as I was looking at the screen and some of the information in here, it struck me how that, first of all, some of this applies to my personal life, some of the issues that I've had, and this has been in the back of my mind for a while, but just seeing some of the clips of information as they've gone by the screen, I am getting really interested to find out the effect that this is having on me, and how some of the issues that I've been having may be related, and I may be able to really learn some really important things from this paper. So I've kind of been awestruck while I've been sitting here just listening to you and watching this information fly by the screen. I've got to read this. We also have someone on the well, before I go say anything else, I want to give the number once again. Want a couple? Let me turn. Oh, I haven't turned on the Q&A. Hold on just a sec, guys.
Q&A session started.
All right, the Q&A is on. If you want to, this is your opportunity to talk and to Clifford, ask him a question. We're just going to take a couple of questions, but I hope that you will call. We do have some people on the console, but I hope that if you want a question, call in the console and press *6, or you can type your question into the chat room. Wow, I'm just really amazed, because some of the things I even saw in your paper just as it flew by, I'm like, wow, that looks like it really applies to what I have been going through, and I need to learn more. So I really, first of all, I would love for you to tell people where they can read this paper. Where can they go and read your work so far and your other papers?
Sure, Russ. And I have to warn, it's not casual reading, but like I said, I've tried to guide people through so that they can, focus on the sections that are in boxes or bold, whatever you're willing to do. And the first part would be maybe more especially tedious for people to deal with, but hopefully it becomes increasingly beneficial as you reach sort of the congregation assessment of the work as it develops. The work is presented through our nonprofit organization, which anyone here is invited to consider offering your services to. There is no pay, and lots of work needs to be done, but everyone is invited to at least offer their help for many things that need to be done. It's all under the nonprofit, which is under the name of Carnicom Institute, under my last name, founded now about 5 years ago. The website is carnicominstitute.org. It is a .org site. You could disregard any strays that you might run into. And the website is at least hopefully navigable to a point where you can at least find it. We always are trying to work on things. But on the home page, you will find an announcement button, pretty prominent, I believe. And under that announcement, you will see the title of this paper, both of them I'm spoken of tonight. This one being called Morgellon's A Working Hypothesis, and it says in progress. And the other one that we started with is also on the announcement page, and it's called Environmental Filament Project and Introduction. So hopefully on the homepage of the Institute site, you'd find access to that. You'll probably see the same under current, you'll see the same paper under current research topics. I think we're trying to give you at least 2 or 3 ways to get there. And then the Grand Library of Research is under a heading there that says Carnicom Institute Research Library. And this is where you'll find the 300 plus papers that have been produced over the last decade and a half. And that's the entire library in a chronological fashion. So hopefully that'll help to direct people where they can find the work.
Absolutely. And if you're looking at the live stream, you're seeing that right now. You're seeing Clifford's website, the Carnicom Institute, and so you're able to see where to go and check out the work of this organization. If you have a question and you're in the console, make sure you press *6 on your phone, or you can type in your questions into the chat. And I'm trying to look in the chat and see if there's anything that people want to ask. I do anthocyanidins in wine. This is this the substance that's having the reaction that makes the wine test work?
Yes, it appears to be, from everything that I can sort of gather at this point. That remained so unknown for so many years, and it bothered me a lot, because the fact that you had that reaction was really important in its own right. I mean, it meant that something was unique and specific about the chemistry of the filament structures that caused that reaction to happen. So that's always been there in the background. And I first ran into this probably a year or so ago when I was studying visible light spectrometry, is where you have color. And I was doing some research related to color, some compound I was looking at. And it even had to do with the iron, actually, at that time. And I remember this statement, from that research, basically saying that the purplish compounds, let's just say it this way, there are many compounds that form between these pigments in grapes and wine, that particular class of pigments, and iron structures. And that really caught my interest, because I knew that we had a reaction. And there's a name for those. We can look them all up. But that caught my interest at that time, because it seemed quite plausible that indeed, because I had already identified the iron at that time. And then the fact that such colored compounds are known as part of visible light spectrometry, it was just a flag to me, I guess. And then what's happened is, as you dig into this biochemistry part, then this is the first time that I start looking at the structure of what these anthocyanins are about. Oh, good, I'm showing there. That starts to show up on the screen. This is fascinating, actually, these subjects. But on the screens here, you'll start to see where now, okay, we know in a generalized way that such a reaction occurs, but how might that relate to the work I'm doing now, where I am actually looking at the structure of these functional groups? And in that process, you start looking at anthocyanins. And what I can say is what's called an aromatic. An aromatic is a ring structure, a very important ring, one of the two main divisions in chemistry between what are called chain structures, alkane groups. Alkenes, they have chain structures of carbon. And then another major division of chemistry is what they call aromatics, or ring structures. And this is a very major important division to make in terms of interpretation of organic chemistry. And the work, if you look at the work shows a very strong element and aspect to it of aromatics, or these rings, what's called the benzene ring structure. It appears to be a rather fundamental, crucial part of the structure, is this aromatic ring structure. And when you look at anthocyanins, I showed the picture on the left there, but you will find that this is exactly what characterizes the structure of these pigments. Okay, they have a strong similarity of form, and I believe we'll have to see if I don't want to get this too technical here right now, but that's the paragraph that's on the screen there as I'm talking about this. And I don't have all the knowledge by any means that I would like to have, but as I look at organic chemistry, what you'll find is, what is known is that these functional groups, we talked about how they're important because they react in certain ways, okay? And the reactions are predictable to some degree, how they will occur. And when you start modifying this aromatic ring, it appears to me that it's a very reasonable consideration, okay, that this type of modification may occur, whether it's iron attaching to it or whatever. But I guess what I'm trying to say is the structure of the anthocyanins, it looks like a perfect setup, basically, for reactions to occur. I think that's how I would describe it. And so I'm offering it again as another avenue of investigation because it's already been demonstrated by observation that such a thing is happening. This is a partial sort of rationale as to why I think it is happening. See, there is the bold statement, right? The likely similarities in structure, in part between the biological filaments and the anthocyanin structure, are offered as a partial explanation for the high chemical reactivity between the biological filaments in red wine. That is sort of my suggestion as to where we need to be going on this issue. And it has to do with the structure, specific structure of those anthocyanins and the importance of aromatic chemistry in the process.
Excellent. Okay. Very good. Yeah, that's now we have a couple questions from the chat room, and just I wanted to ask real quick. I mean, there's debunkers online, and I've dealt with them for years now. They've come after me and they try to claim that geoengineering or spraying aerosol doesn't exist, and it's a joke to me because I can taste it. I'm one of the sensitive ones who can taste and smell this stuff 24 hours a day. It's just been a 8-year nightmare for me since I first experienced it. But what is some of them are saying that this red wine test that it'll work with everybody because it has nothing to do with reacting with this stuff. But is that true? Does it work with everybody? And if so, is that because everybody is exposed, or what is the story behind what these guys are trying to say? If you know what I'm talking about.
Okay, I made one reference to this discussion before. Okay, and at some point we get into the nitty gritty, and we're not allowed to use language like it's just normal. But we have to get into the nitty gritty. So the nitty gritty will be that a specific reaction, a physical reaction, is taking place, observable, and certainly easily observed under the microscope. The language that is used to describe that reaction by those that claim it is normal would be extremely and will be extremely important to dissect. As I have investigated those claims many times over, anytime I would pursue that language, it would always ultimately reside in the production of what is called a precipitate. Okay? A precipitate would be a solid compound formed in a chemical reaction. Okay? And the statements are made that this precipitate is exactly what we're talking about and everything is fine. Okay? Now, I have studied that reaction. I have put wine and I have put saliva, okay, subjected it to both observation as well as under the microscope. There is a precipitate that forms. This is a true statement. There is a reaction between saliva and red wine, and it does produce a precipitate. The difficulty is that the reaction that is being spoken of here does not produce a precipitate. It is not the same reaction. This is a reaction which produces a filament structure. It actually appears to extract it, okay? And this will be a difference. The material is not produced in the saliva. It's extracted from the gums. It's where it will come. The oral samples will be basically extracted from the gums. They are not a precipitate. They are a filament, okay? And therefore, to take it further, one will need to evaluate, and you can evaluate it in half a dozen to a dozen ways, whatever you want. You can start by looking at it. Put it under the scope and look at it, okay? You will find they're not the same, okay? Then you start measuring things, okay? Size is important. They will not be the same, okay? Chemical reactions. You can use qualitative chemical reactions next, okay? They will not react the same qualitatively meaning reaction with certain reagents and such, because they're not the same thing. Okay. In the filament structure, there is a great deal more complexity involved because it also has internal structure, which has been talked about in detail, okay, and observed. And we could go on this forever, but for anybody to say it's normal, if you want to deal with it, we get the scope side by side, we do the reaction, we do the sampling from people, and basically the production of the material will be varying according to different individuals. It appears as though the vast majority, is an understatement, of population will produce this, but what varies is the degree, the amount of production. And sometimes it's actually heinous in terms of the actual level of production, as well as the frequent, in extreme cases, the dental conditions and extreme pain that can frequently accompany this, as well as documented damage and destruction to the teeth as well. And there's reasons for that also with the acidity. But nevertheless, you want to pursue it further, then get your infrared spectrometer out there, okay, and run your tests. And by the way, you're going to have to pull in the environmental filament sample also from over a dozen years ago. And you'll make comparisons at a molecular level in terms of the way it responds to electromagnetic energy. And they will be nothing like one another because they are nothing like one another. And any claim of it being a perfectly normal reaction involving a precipitate is not a statement that even begins to explain the decade plus of study, observations, and analysis that are now evident before us.
Very good. All right, and then you have done this. You have seen it. You said to say that it occurs in the vast majority of people is an understatement. I mean, this is just prevalent all over. I mean, in your experience, the testing that you have done is just shown that the vast majority of people that you've tested have shown these filaments that precipitate out, right?
Absolutely. Run your tests. People want to claim things are normal. Do the work, okay? Do two things for me right away. Grab the 100 people that I talked about. Get their body temperature, okay? Do your work in biology and go find out what the norm was. Present your work and find out what's happening on a broad scale. That's one for you. Second is go grab your group of 100, run your statistical studies, whatever it is. Grab your 100 people, have them subjected to the test. Go ahead and run the test with saliva independently, okay, to run your controls. And then analyze the material that is produced in the half a dozen ways that I've just described. Do your work fairly and honestly, and present your work to the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, excellent. Where can people learn how to do the test?
Well, it's actually quite simple, okay? It'll be described on the site, certainly at some point. If you put in red wine test, you'll certainly see it. But it's really nothing more in principle other than holding red wine in your mouth. And it doesn't have to be red wine. Again, the anthocyanins appear to be at the heart of the reaction. Grape juice could work. And anything that would have those pigments theoretically should work. But basically, you just hold this wiggle wine in your mouth for 2 or 3 minutes. And by the way, you get to clean out your mouth as much as you want beforehand. Make sure it's perfectly clean. Get your mouth so that you know there's nothing in your mouth whatsoever. And then hold it in your mouth for about 3 minutes or so. Would be at least one frame of reference. And then expel it into a dish or something where you can see it with high enough contrast. And get yourself a needle and start poking at it and asking yourself if it has a filament nature on a macro scale as opposed to a precipitate form, which would be a solid clump, basically a small particle, solid, and start asking questions. Run it through a coffee filter. Actually, the research project, Morgellon's research project, has that described in detail. Run it through a coffee filter and save the material and photograph it. It's all described on there, actually, in quite a bit of detail.
Oh, okay, excellent. Some of the information, I mean, you mentioned about the dental issues. I saw in the paper as it was scrolling by the screen about dental decay issues that are associated with this. The last few years, out of the blue, I've been starting to struggle myself with dental issues out of the blue. I've never had dental issues. My teeth have been quite extraordinary, and I've been banging my head against the wall trying different things, trying to figure out what is going on with my teeth. And this is part of the impetus that is gonna make me personally read this paper and start taking this information to heart, because it just this may provide some of the information that I've been looking for.
By the way, when these filaments, if you observe where they come from, look where they come from, okay? Precipitate in saliva, it doesn't even have any comparison, because first of all, it would be fairly homogeneous in the mouth, okay? But you will see that this material will emanate from the gum line, okay? It will come from the teeth. There's another rather direct observation that I have been witness to, that from a certain individual. You will observe this over a course of several years, and you will see in this particular case, the individual, it only comes from the upper gum, okay? Now, if you're going to start using your examples of saliva, you don't get away with that one, okay? There's something very interesting and unique in this particular case, that the upper gum is where the material emanates from. Furthermore, the photographs that you see on the website at this point are a result of that process over a period of several years where the teeth were eventually destroyed. It is of more than passing interest in this case that the upper teeth of that individual were destroyed only in correspondence with the repeated prevalence and presence of the filament network over a period of several years. And the bottom teeth, which did not produce the same structures, remain intact. There's all kinds of ways, people can have their discussions any way you want. Ultimately, you are responsible for doing the work and the observation. If you're going to claim in the scientific spirit, you must do the work. You must present your work to the world, and the world is your judge as to what is true or not.
Wow. Okay, from the gum line, upper gums. Wow, this is kind of blowing my mind right now. Wow.
And then look into, personally, if we had certain parts of this information a decade ago, I think we would be in a better position, because you'll find that the dental and bone structure of an individual is not something going to change very easily if there's been serious degradation to it.
Right.
Look into the reasons for dental decay, along with the association of this particular condition of the filament production. Look into the impact of acidity in the body and mineral depletion, and that impact upon bone and teeth. And then what you start doing about it.
Okay.
Before it's too late.
Well, absolutely. So I would encourage anyone who's listening to this, and a lot of people will hear this replay, the recording of this, which we post forever on our website. If you're having dental issues, maybe this is something to learn about and explore further. 3 quick questions from the chat room, and then we'll call it a night. Someone asked, as a college student, can you provide these papers as a scholarly journal?
I'm not sure exactly what is being stated there. Yeah, my work is as it stands, okay? I am a citizen. My work is presented as an independent researcher. I have no ties or any affiliations with any organization whatsoever. So I'm not sure exactly what's being referred to, but quote, if they expect to see me in what you call a peer-reviewed journal, that's not exactly my domain. And my domain is the public, basically, evaluation of the information and whether it's true or false. Again, I'm not sure exactly how the statement is being framed, other than my work is freely available for evaluation by the public.
Okay, I think probably they were just looking for ways of getting more exposure. My guess is that's what they were meaning, getting more exposure for the papers. Maybe somebody as a student could submit them to some.
Yeah. And in that vein, there is a constant and open appeal for that process, basically participating to help distribute and disseminate the information if one believes it is of value. And that's an open invitation. And in fact, I made mention of one of our staff members that's working on that. Years overdue. I mean, this is one of the major issues and problems is distribution and dissemination of the information.
Yeah, boy, I can believe that. Yeah, there's people on the chat talking about dental issues now. I just am shocked by that. I never knew there was any connection at all, and now it's just really, it's kind of like I feel like a 2x4 just hit me across the head. You know, you have these events maybe 4 or 5 times in your life, and I've been looking for an answer. And I'm not saying this is the answer, but I'm just saying, wow, that I had no idea there was a connection. And so far, I've seen just in this couple hours of talking and in scanning your paper, I'm already seeing some correlations that are just oh just amazing me. I hope people who are listening to this take the time to send people to Carnicom Institute. And you saw in this video where you can see the papers. Check this out. 2 last quick questions. Somebody on the chat room asked, Russ, what about the physical samples from lesions? Is there anything being done with samples like that?
Well, the work that I have done involving lesions are basically centered around the filament structures, okay, that have been within them. That was the start of all of the work to begin with. Now, in terms of, the real situation, I'm not a doctor, and the Institute is not a clinic. The Institute is a nonprofit research and educational institution for both environmental and health issues. That's its purpose, right? So anybody that starts talking about, examining, such and such a thing in a biological sense, or trying to involve the Institute in biological samples, you have a roadblock ahead of you because this is not the proper place for it to be done in any kind of public capacity, okay? Now, that being said, you will find that on the Institute, there is a very specific research project that is, it's beyond being organized. It is underway, okay? And the status report on that is on the site, but it's basically for the last 2 years, now a year and a half, the organization is involved in attempting to basically structure what you would call a study under the purview of medical professionals. And there's also an ethical aspect to that, which is what the Institute has been involved in now for the 6 to 8 months, what they call an IRB. And we are working with what you call individuals that are lending support to the cause of attempting to formalize a structure for a study over future time. This is not a trivial task. As with many things we've talked about, you're basically talking about putting the burden of public officials and health organizations and research by government. You're basically trying to transfer that burden over to the public because of failure to do so in the arena that it actually deserves. So this is not an easy process, but we are engaged in that effort, and I would say there are significant inroads being made. But it's, the Institute is not a clinic where you submit a biological sample to and we examine it. That's not the way this is to be handled. So there's a combination there. Actively, we are a research and education organization. The organization is sponsoring and developing a study that we are attempting to formalize, but that will only be done with the participation of basically professionals in the field that believe the study is worthy of research. And that is, it's more than a plan. That process is in place at this time.
All right, excellent. We have people. One last question for the evening, but before I ask that question, people on the chat room are thanking you. Totally amazing. Thank you so much, Clifford. Another comment. Please thank Clifford for his time. We have a room full of people here listening. They all want more of this discussion in the very near future, please. So many thanks and much appreciation. for your work and for your time tonight. The last question for the evening, this comes also from the chat room. The biggest question on everyone's mind is why? And I believe they're referring to why are we being assaulted with these materials?
Well, some people find my response here lacking. I simply offer it in the way that I think is most realistic. And sometimes you just don't connect. I don't know what the difference is, but sometimes you just don't connect in terms of communication, because I've been asked this question many times. And the first place I'll say to offer to look into what I say about this, I say, well, have you watched the documentary I did in 2005? Okay? Because in that documentary back in 2005, I'll introduce like these 5 areas. Some people are sick of me of saying this, and other people act like I said nothing. So I don't know where the answer will be.
Aerosol crimes? Is that the one?
Yes, exactly. In that documentary, I'll list like the 5 areas. If somebody asks me why, this would be my answer to that. If somebody tells me that they're developing, electromagnetic projects to basically concentrate and control energy and the distribution and application of energy upon the population, both in a military sense as well as any type of control sense you could imagine. To me, that's an answer, okay? That's a part of why. I have like 5 of those whys, and I've added 2 more on. So I have like 7 of the whys. So if somebody asks me that question and I give that answer, I say, well, that seems like a pretty reasonable answer. Thank you. But I've had people, I'll go over the 7, and it's like, it doesn't mean anything to them what I say, okay? So I don't know how to answer this entirely, other than I have tried to offer what I think are the application areas, and they're very profound. And for people that push me to have it in their little nutshell for one word, I'll give it to them, but I don't know what they do with it. But the word is that of control. Okay? There is a desire, and there are systems in place to exert control. And if you would like me to generalize it enough, it is control in any and every manner that you can conceive of. Whether it's your communication, whether it's your health, whether it's your level of education, whether it's your state of knowledge, whether it's your economic success in life, there are systems in place that attempt to manage and exert control over the basically manifestation of all of the productive and fruitful areas of life. Now, that may be too general, but that's my ultimate answer if you want it in the very general philosophical sense. There are such systems, there are such methods, and there are such applications. The types of things that we are seeing in our world now, across the spectrum, including the work that we're speaking of here tonight, is representative of the many forms by which these processes and systems are being exerted. You want another simple one closer to home? Your phone is tapped, okay? I've known for a dozen years, just by instinct, that every single communication that takes place basically in this country and the world is basically fed into a database, okay? It wasn't any surprise to me when this information came out. That's a system of control. Now, again, when I say this, some people will react in despair, and they'll say, oh, I can't do anything. It's all lost. I'm a victim. And you sink into despair and depression. Okay, I view that as a choice in life, if that's what you want to do. It's not what I do, and it's not what I would seek in anybody doing. If somebody tells me that they're out to control me, I will stand up and fight, essentially, for freedom and the right of the human spirit to exist and to excel and to do remarkable things in life. That's what I will do. And the more that I am challenged, the more I will respond. And hence, you have in my life 15 years or so devoted towards subjects that I never anticipated that I would have to assume, and that are woefully incomplete and insufficient, but I hope that they are at least a pathway towards each one of us accepting our own responsibility for what we do in the face of any system or body that attempts to exert such control. I don't know if that's the answer that was wanted, but that's what comes out.
Well, you know, I will tell you, Clifford, that you know, I began researching what's going on in the big picture in the 80s. I wanted answers to life. I wanted to know why government always seems to be so incompetent, and I came to the conclusion it wasn't incompetence, it was corruption. And on and on and on. I researched, especially through law, because law provides a beautiful platform for seeing the intent of these large groups and organizations. But you know, the funny thing is when people ask me to consolidate my answer to that same question, the word control is the exact same word that I use. Well, I tell you what, this has been eye-opening for me. I know this Saturday I'm going to be on the CarnicomInstitute.org website doing some research, because I've actually been personally struck by some of the information I've seen tonight. I think I have a feeling on an instinctive level that I'm going to be finding some answers that I've been seeking now for at least 2 to 3 years to my own issues, and I'm very thankful for that. People over the chat room are very thankful for your work, very grateful. I've heard so many success stories from people who have taken the information that you've produced through your institute and through your research and applied it to their lives, and as a result, they have regained their health. In like you have said that you know you're not offering cures, you're not offering this information like that. You're offering your research, and people. I'm very happy to see people applying to their lives. So I know where I'm going to be this weekend. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We ran way over, and I love that. I'm
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
we did, and I love that. That's the way it should be. I think it's a beautiful thing. But thank you so much for all your work, for your dedication. You've been doing this for years. You make your information freely available. So I don't know what to say, but a big thank you, and a thank you from everybody who's listening tonight.
Thank you, Russ, and my many thanks to the audience also for those that are willing to basically, endure my sort of consumption of their time in life here in a way that's not always easy to get through and not always a quick answer. So I appreciate those people that have the patience to stick with us here, and I hope that it is beneficial in some respects. Certainly the basis of the work, I think we all have something to offer, and we all do have that freedom to offer. And this is only one small part in a much broader picture that I hope we all participate in to improve the world. So thank your audience and you in return. And I'll continue when I can. The honest truth is that our organization is small. It is meager in terms of its funding and support. We have some fantastic people that have joined us over the years. It's been a slow process. Probably have about a dozen folks that are working with us now actively. The caliber of the individuals is quite marvelous to see. There is a continual and constant appeal for that basically level of excellence that is needed. And if you think that you have a role in contributing to that, I hope that you'll start talking to us, and we'll put you to work.
Absolutely. And I would also encourage people to go, and Carnicom, Clifford is not asking me to do this by any means, but I am. Go to CarnicomInstitute.org and please subscribe to their updates and donate to their organization. They are working on very, very small funds, and they are producing information that, in my opinion, is not only absolutely vitally important and very unique, but is essential for us to eventually solve this problem in the legal sense, but also, as I said a minute ago, people have applied this research to their own lives and found solutions that have revolutionized their health. And I don't think without the information available, they would have known what to do, because it's just too exotic. It's too You just can't find this anywhere else that I know of. So many, many thanks to you, Clifford, for your work and for your time. Absolutely a pleasure having you on here every time. People flock to hear you. Many thousands of people will hear this recording over the next several months. So you have a good night. Take care of yourself, and we will chat again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Russ, for everything you're doing.
Absolutely. Good night.
Yeah, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. And everybody on the live stream, please join us every Monday night, 8:30 Eastern Time, 5:30 Central, 5:30 Pacific Time, where we have special guests. We talk about subjects that other people are not talking about. Please review this and share this program with others. You will find it at globalskywatch.com/live. We have a repository of all of our past shows and guests, so you can find that information there. Like I said, carnicominstitute.org. Please visit them, donate to them, subscribe to their updates, and support their work, because they're helping people in a very unique way by providing information that I have not seen anywhere else, and they're doing it on a shoestring budget. It's a work of love. It's a sacrificial work, I believe, that they are sacrificing much in their life. And we're going to be talking soon on an upcoming show with about Morgellon specifically. Got a guest in the chat room. I haven't asked her yet, but she's been on before, and I want her to be on again. And she's made a lot of progress with much help. She's a very big fan of the research of the Carnicom Institute, and she has used that exotic or used that very specialized information provided there and applied it to her life and her health. And I want to know and I want to share how she recovered, how she had such a great recovery, and what information she applied. So join us in one of the few next upcoming week, Monday nights, and we'll be talking about that. All right, you can also see our all of our past programs are archived on our YouTube channel as well. And you can go to our Facebook group, which is called Chemtrails Global Skywatch. There's been a few groups that have been trying to mimic our group, but our group has over 12,000 members. Please come on our Facebook group, Chemtrails Global Skywatch. Look for the one that has 12,000 members. That's the real one, not the other fake ones or the other ones who are mimicking our group. And join us for large group of lively people. A lot of discussion, a lot of information is shared there. Been a pleasure being with you. It's been a pleasure having Clifford on with us. It always is. The information is very unique and vitally important. So please listen to the replay and share it with others, and check out his website. We will be back with you next week. So y'all have a good night, and stick around for the after talk if you like. We're going to stream that live if you want to talk on the phone, or you want to be you just want to listen in on the live stream or being part of the chat. We'll keep it going here. You all, we'll see you next week. Good night.